to the Divorce TV panel show of experts. I'm Susie Miller, your divorce strategist, and we're going to be covering a couple of key topics today. One is that, according to the Family Law Association resolution, is Good Divorce Week, with a hashtag on it. And we've been hearing a lot about no-fault divorce over the last few months, so I wanted to ask a few questions around that, so clarify about why does it matter, and actually have an update on what's happening on that. And I wanted to start also with some figures, because this idea that we've got Good Divorce Week, you might ask, well, how can you have a good divorce? I was reading in the Telegraph that the cost of getting divorced is rising. So we've got lawyers that say that the average UK divorce bill now stands at more than £70,000. So beware. And the maintenance payments cost the average divorcee a further £5,000 a year from salary, and they can also expect to spend about £5,000 on finding themselves new accommodation. So the question is, how can it be a good divorce when it costs so much? And part of that discussion about the financial side, we've got Henry Ellison here, who is a financial expert, and you're a financial planner, aren't you?
Financial planner, that's right.
And what's the difference between a financial planner and a normal financial advisor?
Well, I suppose we market ourselves out as trying to create a plan for someone. So understanding what their resources are today and what they want from the future, what their goals and aspirations are in the future, and creating a plan, rather than just flogging them a pension, which is what we feel an advisor might do. And
do you think with a plan people are going to have a better divorce?
Well, I certainly hope so. Absolutely. I think it's important to know where you're going, and then when you're divorcing, what you're trying to extract from that process, so that you're sure and certain for your future.
So I guess really to have a good divorce, you've got to have a more sort of intelligent, informed approach. So Joanna here is a family mediator. Joanna, when people go through divorce, I was on Facebook this morning actually, and I often find this with people, and it was somebody's friend who'd they were going to court because the other person didn't want to allow mediation to work. And I hear this a lot, and what I wanted to ask you is that if someone does end up in court, can they change course at any point?
Absolutely. So the whole process is set up to be able to enable parties at any stage in the process to be able to come to mediation. So there's no limitation, there's no right or wrong time, it's what suits the parties at the end of the day. So whatever they're comfortable with, if at that point or at any point they feel that they want to come away and have an informal discussion about things in terms of how to arrive at the same conclusion, then yes, by all means they can do that.
So they can change direction, because I think a lot of people don't realise that. Verity is a collaborative family lawyer, so just to explain briefly what that is, because it's not a normal lawyer, is it?
No, it's a little bit different. So the collaborative process is different to what one might think of as a traditional legal process, which would be letters pinging backwards and forth and then ending up at the doorstep of a court. The collaborative process is a process where we do everything as a team in meetings. So each party to the marriage will have their own collaboratively trained lawyer, and we go into a room and we have a four-way meeting. Sometimes we'll have a five-way meeting with a financial neutral like Henry, or a coach or a therapist, somebody like that might help as well. But it's all about working together to get the best outcome for that family.
And so they don't have to go to court at all then?
No, in fact, in the collaborative process, in order to enter into that process, you actually have to sign an agreement which binds both the parties and the lawyers, and we commit not to going to court. So if that process sadly doesn't work, which is rare, we hope it will, but if that process doesn't work, then the lawyers have to part way with their client and they go to somebody else who will then take them on to the court process. But that's a way of motivating the clients and the lawyers to get into this process and really make it work.
And what came out of this conversation I was having on Facebook this morning was the friend was so frustrated that her friends ended up in court because it seemed to be such a sort of silly reason, and I think it was about a financial reason. It's like people lose all sense of sanity, don't they? Which brings me to both Janet here and Susan. Perhaps Susan, you could talk about a little bit about the importance of the emotional well-being, because it has a huge impact on the whole way the process plays out, doesn't it?
Emotions usually run extremely high in divorce situations, and they're debilitating and useless and not helpful at all. You know, there's very strong emotions that people go through, from the top end of being unforgiving and resentful, angry. Anger is a huge concern, and going down to depressed, sad, disappointed, all the whole area of emotions. And if you can keep a lid on the emotions while the process is going through, then everybody is going to benefit.
Yeah, and you use EFT, don't you, emotional freedom techniques? How does that help people?
Well, EFT works on 2 levels. It works at a deeply transformational level, where people are coming over a period of time. It also works at an impressive quick fix. If you are running rage all the time, or anger, or frustration, and you're going to a meeting or your daily life, and you walk out the door, you can quieten that within 5 or 10 minutes. You know, you can go out the door without wanting to smack someone in the mouth, for example. And equally, if you're at the lower end and sad and depressed, 5 or 10 minutes of just sitting and doing this tapping technique can allow you to go out with a little bit more confidence than you would if you were in a very low state.
So a simple tool actually to help empower people to not go crazy during divorce.
Yeah.
And Janet, you come across people with right through to sort of full-on mental health issues which may well be triggered by the divorce.
Absolutely. I mean, it's worth saying that at the moment in the UK, 15%, there's been a 15% increase in young people on antidepressants, and that young people category, believe it or not, is from under 12 years old.
Wow.
So that's quite frightening, isn't it? And you know that NHS England have embraced health coaching, and that's to help people maintain long-term health conditions and also mental health, support their mental health needs, many of which, because of the work I've done, have been around divorce. So actually supporting someone through that process emotionally and with their well-being in mind actually can get a better outcome for them, because often when we deal with divorce, we're dealing with emotional, physical, financial abuse sometimes, and so actually getting them through that process and building up their confidence can give them the right emphasis to actually go on and actually decide what they want from that divorce, and building up confidence is a big part of that.
So would you say that simply going to the GP saying I'm feeling depressed about my divorce, which is understandable, and numbing themselves might not always be the most proactive way to, that actually what they need is real coaching and real
I
help.
would say not, yes.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate against actually going down the antidepressant route, because actually it numbs it down and it always comes out later. So we're talking about, if you've got a very long divorce, we were talking about this being a good divorce week, that actually that can be detrimental for everybody, including the children. So if you can actually get them to understand what they want by building a plan, an emotional well-being plan, then actually they will actually survive better as a family even than they would if they go down a very destructive route.
And that's the key, isn't it? 'Cause at the end of the day, it's not just two people who are separating, there's usually children involved, so you've got a much more complex structure in place. One of the excuses that people often give for not using either collaborative or mediation or dispute resolution is, oh, there's been domestic violence. So be interested to know from you, Joan, what's your thoughts on that and your experience?
Well, firstly, mediation will handle that kind of situation by just maintaining equality between the parties, so they both get heard, they both get an opportunity to ask questions and to reflect on what's been said and what's actually happening in the meeting. So it's kept on that equal level, so there's no imbalance of power there. The other thing is that it's about making sure there's a safe environment, and because that's facilitated, there are ground rules right at the beginning that they both agree to, otherwise the meeting just can't go ahead. Also, it's possible to, if they're not able to stay in the same room, to have them in different rooms, in which case I as a mediator would work between the two to make sure that what's been said by one is heard and understood by the other, and to help them get to a solution that way, but also to make sure that if it's necessary to keep them apart in terms of safety, that they come and leave at different times so that they don't collide at any stage, actually arriving or when they leave. So it's all concerned about making sure that there's a safe environment.
So when there is domestic abuse, it doesn't have to be an automatic tick box out of mediation, which
Not
unfortunately is exactly what tends to happen. And in your opinion, Verity, if you end up in court with someone who's been psychologically or physically abusing you over many years, do you get that sort of sense of protection and consideration about who arrives when? Does it work that way?
They can. There are boxes on most of the court forms which say, do you need any special facilities? But it's difficult, with the resources that are available, with the facilities available at courts. It's not easy, and people who have been in perhaps an abusive relationship do find the court process scary. Of course they do. And anybody would find the court process scary, but if you've been in that kind of situation, it's even worse for you. So I absolutely agree that if there's been domestic violence, I don't automatically assume that can't be a mediation case, that can't be a collaborative case. One of the things that I work very hard to do is really get to know my clients and work out what's the best route for them. If they feel comfortable, if they feel safe going into a mediation, going into a collaborative, we can do that. But it's about them feeling safe, and especially if they've been a victim, I want them to know that they now are in control of this process. They've got choices. And
if someone is working perhaps with Susan or Janet, and they're in that situation in the court, it's going to help support them. But with collaborative and also with mediation as well, now, isn't it? They can potentially bring those third parties, and also particularly financial experts already. It was well known to bring them into those cases. So you can have more of a sort of team support effect, which must feel a lot more supportive, I'm sure. To be frank though, Verity, if you've got a court case that's running and you've got a solicitor that perhaps comes from a firm that's not like yours, they don't have any dispute resolution on offer, it's very difficult for that solicitor to go to their client, you do realise at any point you can change your mind and go back to dispute resolution. You can see that your soon-to-be ex isn't enjoying this experience very much. So maybe we could try again. There's absolutely no incentive at all for them to do that. In fact, it could lose. It's going to put them, may not make their firm very happy with them. Do you think that that's an issue with the family law system itself? That people tend to get shoved, they go down a road and then they just say, that's it, and there's very little incentive for anyone around them to go, well, you can stop this now. You change direction.
Historically, I think you're right, Susie. That's definitely been a problem where family law was quite one-dimensional, and we just trotted people down the road to the courtroom, and that's where they ended up. I think now most family lawyers are much more aware of all the dispute resolution options. Certainly if people see a resolution lawyer, they're going to see somebody who is trained in all those different or at least knows about all those different resolution options. As a lawyer, obviously I am collaboratively trained now, but I'm not a mediator. It doesn't stop me referring people to mediation, because I would much rather have clients who are happy, get their problem resolved quickly and with the best outcome for them and their family, than have a client who is in the court process, is unhappy, and although that potentially is lucrative from a financial perspective, in the long term they aren't the clients who are going to go and tell their friends what a good lawyer you were. The person who has the nice mediation, the nice collaborative, comes up with a great deal that works well for their family, they're the ones that are going to be telling their friends. So it would be short-sighted for somebody, a lawyer, to think the only way to build a business is to be throwing everybody into the court system.
Yeah, no, that sounds very sensible. And because with the whole emotional aspect, it's such a long process it can be, can't it? Particularly if you go down the court route. So, Susan, there's real dangers, aren't there, to be in that kind of a level of stress and confusion for a long period of time?
Yeah, it's a fact that 90% plus of emotional stress leads to our physical ailments, big and strong and frightening or chronic. We need, in the long term, when someone potentially, I've been there, you know, and almost being divorced, there's...
Now share your story, go on. Do you mean, can't just say almost been divorced?
Almost. I finally decided that I was going to have to divorce my husband, who was an alcoholic, and I thought I could resolve the situation. Realised I couldn't, and I finally went down the divorce route. And lo and behold, he died about 3 days before he was due, 5 days before he was due to leave the house. So I didn't need to go through the divorce route. It was sorted out for me that way. And I also wrote a book about it, and I'll just mention Survive and Thrive After Trauma, because huge trauma, you know, if you're living with an alcoholic, if you're going down the divorce route and then they die, you know, it affects us emotionally. But more importantly, it affects us at a physical level, which is only discovered later. However, people going through the divorce route perhaps are channeled, and they'll deal with that aspect later. You know, a lot of us are guilty of dealing with our physical health only at the very last minute. And that's a great pity, because it's very, very related, extremely related. So looking after your emotional health is key to enjoying life after divorce. Actually, that's a good way of putting it.
And I think that's a good point, because a lot of the time people think of divorce as a bit like, obviously it's like having a baby. You think about the birth, but not the next 20 years. And when you're going through the process, you want it to be a process that's going to allow you to be a strong, healthy, co-parenting family going forwards. So the choice of the process, and whether you give up on the divorce, on the court route at some point, if you're able to think, right, let's stop this now, let's turn this around, can have profound effects on the family. Which brings us to no-fault divorce. So before we just get into that, the emotional side of things definitely is perhaps one of the core reasons why no-fault divorce has become such a nuisance. But from a financial perspective, do you find that working with couples or individuals to create a financial plan, that if they're emotionally in a bit of a state, or they don't really know, they can't think beyond their divorce, does that make it really difficult for you?
Excuse me, yes, absolutely, Susie. What we like to do is to get in front of the divorcing couple as early in the process as we can, because we understand that emotions will be raw, and there's quite probably a lot of mistrust between the two parties, and so we find that if we can get there early on and put down on the table exactly what the financial position is of both parties and what both parties want from the separation, that actually it removes a lot of the worry and the concern from that whole divorce process, which in our experience has taken that emotion away and actually allows them then to concentrate on perhaps slightly more important issues, you know, who's going to look after the children and things like that. Which the money is, of course it's important, but it's probably not as important as those parts. But
not understanding how it's going to work out with the money, in that the fear, you turn away. If you can help people have less fear, they're going to behave better, aren't they?
And it's a cliche, but of course more often than not we find it's the women who haven't spent so much time looking after the money, and the husbands who have. And they do have the worry and anxiety as to how much money they need for the future, what's their income going to be if they haven't been working, how much does a mortgage cost, how much is the electricity bill, and where's all the income going to come from to pay for all these bits and pieces. And that's the great part of financial planning, really, is because we can say, well, actually we've got this and we've got that and we've got this, and when we bring all this together with an equitable split, you'll be absolutely fine and you can continue to enjoy the life that you've become accustomed to. If you go back to the beginning, they can save themselves £70,000 in legal fees, that's another great saving that they can make.
Yeah, and then with a plan, they've got a better idea of what they can do with it and how they can structure it. But it's taking away the fear, isn't it? So do you find that the fear around finances is an issue with people that you work with?
It's huge, yes. I mean, many women, as you quite rightly said, don't actually deal with the finances. And I have a client, just a recent client, who would almost destroy herself by thinking that there is no future, you know, and that's quite common, isn't it, which is where the antidepressants come in. And saying to people, actually, you can take charge of your future by referring them to various parties, I think is a great way forward, you know, and I still think that we need to get out there and actually let people know that, because I don't think people are aware of how this process works.
Yeah. Yeah. And unreasonable behaviour, I was reading in the Telegraph, is the most common basis for divorce, accounting for 52% of divorce petitions brought by women and 37% of those by men. However, research by the Co-op says that adultery is the most common reason for divorce, followed by couples growing apart, struggling with money issues, abuse and addiction. So these are the real reasons why people often have their divorce triggered, but they have to put on a form a reason, and wisely they're putting unreasonable behaviour, because that's the least inflammatory thing they can put. So from the whole thing around no-fault divorces, why should we even be putting them in that position in the first place? So Verity, could you give us a little update on where we are with no-fault divorce?
So where we are at the moment is, as you rightly pointed out, there is one ground for divorce, that's irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, but you have to prove that by relying on one of 5 facts. Now, 3 of those facts are fault-based, that's unreasonable behaviour, adultery and desertion, although desertion is very rare now. The other 2 are separation, and that's either 2 years with the consent of the other party or 5 years if the other party doesn't consent. The difficulty around that is that if people want to get things resolved now, as people often do for very good reasons, for stability for the children, for financial reasons, that means we have to shoehorn them into one of those fault-based categories. And quite often, when you're meeting a client, there isn't anybody at fault. You know, they're just saying, we've just fallen out of love, we just don't like each other anymore, you know, we've just changed as people. And then the first thing I have to do is go, well, okay, but what about this? You know, what behaviour really annoys you? Because we have to put something on the form. That's a horrible position for me to be in. When I meet my clients, I don't want to be, first and foremost, talking to them about the horrible, bad things about their ex-partner, you know, or the person they want to be their ex. I want to be focusing on, okay, you're adults, you've made that decision, you want to end the marriage, let's move forward in a positive, constructive way. Let's do this in the best way. You may be a separating family, you don't have to be a broken family. That's what I want to be focusing on. And that's what we hope no-fault divorce will allow. Resolution have very much led the campaign on that.
How long?
How long of resolution can have been?
How long till we get it?
Oh, how long till we get it? Oh, well, that's a difficult question with the government and Brexit and everything. There is a consultation now. So the government have finally realised, they have listened, they get that this is something which people want, and they've put forward a consultation as to how it might work, which roughly they will wipe away those 5 facts and they will have just one notification, and there will be a delay, and then 6 months later you will get your final decree of divorce. So that's the idea. That consultation is being responded to now, and professionals are putting their opinions in, and any interested parties can obviously respond to that consultation. And then once that consultation is received, hopefully the results of that will be positive, and then hopefully we'll get law. But that takes time.
It's going to be a while. So
yeah, it's going to be a little while.
People kind of need to know that there is a dance, but the game that you have to play, and they have to know how to do it. Mm-hmm. Is that an area where mediation could be very useful? Because I do often say to people, if they're in a position where they're still talking to each other, is why don't you sit down with a mediator, fill in your petition and everything, but don't decide exactly on the grounds yet, and have that discussion, because as a mediator, presumably you can give them, as Verity can as a lawyer, a realistic idea of what would be enough because it can't be you've left the top of the toothpaste, is it? It's got to be, but there's no sort of science, there's no set rules for it, are there? So you presumably have a sort of sense of what will be enough to be allowed for the divorce to continue, but if they can do it together, talking, then they know it's a game and they're not going to take offence.
So a lot of people put in their divorce petitions, they then come to mediation. At that point, it's about re-educating them, so it takes them back from considering the defensive positions of the blame factors and talking about how they felt and why they felt about things that have happened in the past. It allows them both to hear things in a way that they probably didn't before. Before it might have been a lot of shouting and screaming. They hear the noise, but they don't hear the words. So this allows them to hear. And because sometimes they're hearing things for the first time, which sounds strange, but sometimes it's the case, their defences are down and they're much more willing to explore things on a different level. Once they've dealt with the issues of the past, things that have brought them to the point of needing a mediator, they can then discuss, how they want to move forward. And then it makes it easier for if we have got any, have any couples that come to me and they haven't actually put in that petition yet, they can then consider how they want to word it or how they can place certain facts in a way that's not going to be offensive to the other person, and therefore they're avoiding the possibility of that, type of conflict that you often get with a matter going to court.
Could I say it's also an acceptance, isn't it, of that situation?
Absolutely,
so
yes,
if you can reach
right.
them, both of them, to actually accept that situation,
Yes.
this is where we're going forward, this is what's going to happen, then actually you do get a more positive outcome
Yes,
for
that's
everybody.
right.
And that's a very good point. So really, right before they start sending out petitions, right from the beginning, it makes sense to sit down either with a mediator or a coach, but get someone like a mediator or a lawyer to make sure that what they're putting in is going to be enough, but that it's something that's a proper discussion, and that's something most people don't think of doing at all, is it? No. So to round off, I just wanted to ask what your thoughts are on what changes could happen. So we know it's going to take a little while for no-fault divorce to come into place, but let's imagine that there is a Ministry of Peace, which we will have one day, and that they were in charge of the full reformation of the family law system, which would be potentially quite radical. What I'm going to ask you all, it's a bit mean because I haven't told you this, what would be, could be something very simple, but what would be something that you would encourage the Ministry of Peace to encourage the family law system to do, and to change the whole process of how families go through divorce, which at the moment is still very much, people think, go to a lawyer, but as we've been discussing, there's lots of people they could be going to talk to, and a more collaborative approach would be a better way forward. So Susan, it could be just quite a small thing.
Let's see, ideally there can be huge trauma involved in divorcing, with the high feelings as I mentioned earlier, but to look into the emotions, to work with the individuals, to let them see that moving on with their life would appear to be the best move that's happening. So to look at the emotions, to help people quieten and fear, to look into the fear of the unknown. All our areas of speciality, a lot of people are fearful, and to make a more holistic approach to it.
To help them really prepare.
Yes.
Almost maybe like boot camp them.
Yeah.
Potentially. So they've got some real skill sets. What about you, Verity? What would you change?
Well, I could talk about reform of the family justice system all day. Nobody wants to hear that. So, but I would radically, I think I would start much earlier on. I would have it as part of the curriculum that children have to learn about relationships, about marriage, about what the laws are. It's unbelievable how many people don't know that there are different laws if you're married or if you're cohabiting, or that people still believe there's common law husband, common law wife, which doesn't exist in this jurisdiction at all. So I would have have it in the curriculum that people have to learn about that kind of thing.
And they could actually learn dispute resolution,
Yes.
which I believe is
Absolutely.
one of the things that they want to do for the Ministry of Peace. So it's prepare everyone from 10 or 5 onwards how to deal with life, because this is everyday life, isn't it? What about you?
It's a very good question, Susie. Thanks for asking.
With no warning.
With no warning, no, that's right. I must say, I mean, I think the whole thing about getting divorced is being armed with as much information right from the outset as you possibly can. How one legislates for that, I think, is a very tricky thing. The no-fault divorce, in my mind, seems like a particularly sound and sensible part to start with. But I quite like this idea of some sort of a boot camp, to bring the warring factions in together and surround them with sensible thinking people to try and help them come to amicable and sane decisions.
Thank you. What about you?
I think that the whole process has come to a point where it needs to change, because it's about people talking about something from a very abstract point of view. I think what's been lost is the fact that it's about a very subjective view of what is happening in the lives of the people that are involved. And because of that, it's meant that we're now only considering the opportunity of having something that's based on a no-blame culture, because that's talking about the people, that's talking about their emotion and how they're actually dealing with these things and how they're going to be moving forward. So if what they can incorporate is to encourage people to use forums, whatever that may be, to talk more, to listen to each other more, from very, very early on, it means then that by the time they decide that they're ready to get to the stage where they're ready to part, it will be a completely different picture, because they would have had time to, in the right environment, safe environment, to be able to reflect, to have that open discussion, and come out with something that's a bit more productive and something that is more geared to what they really want.
Yeah. So that almost emotional, psychological preparation,
Yes.
rather than just throwing themselves into mediation, which is almost, it does feel like it's been stuck on as an antidote to a system that doesn't work, rather than making it part of the early stages of the whole journey. Yeah, thank you. Janet.
Right at the end, you've covered everything. So what can I say?
I personally believe that divorce is a mental health issue.
It is a mental health issue. I'm glad, I like the idea of the educational approach. I think that's really important. One of the things I see more and more is huge hostility from lengthy divorces that have gone, whatever the decision was made, people are very resentful, and that only creates one, hostility towards the legal system, 2, an impact on mental health. And I think we need to be much more holistic and rounded, have a rounded approach, and understand there are children here we're teaching the future to. So if we're teaching them that divorce is bad, or that there's going to be lots of hostility which will go on for years and years and years, we're actually giving them that kind of education at the moment. So I do think we need to change our whole approach, and I think there's been some valuable things come out here today.
We'll submit it to the relevant people. So to round off, thank you very much for watching the Divorce Expert panel show on Divorce TV, and we're just going to finish off with a very little reminder from each of us about what everybody does, where you can find us if you want to find out more information. And let's start with you, Janet.
Okay, family and parenting coach, janetstead.co.uk.
Joanne Phillips from Joanne Phillips Mediation. Website is www.joannephillipsmediation.co.uk.
Susan Cow-Miller, health and lifestyle coach, EFT practitioner, specialising in stress and anxiety management and getting to the root cause, the why we are ill. And my website's hampshireeft.co.uk.
You've got some great videos, haven't you?
Oh, yeah,
tapping videos.
I've got a lot of, yes, I have a selection of tapping videos. Helplessness, fear, anxiety, anger. Thank you.
I'm Verity Hudson-Hickey. I'm a collaborative lawyer at Tishall's Family Law Solicitors. You can visit our website at tishawsolicitors.co.uk and come and see us, and we will do our best to help you have a good divorce.
I'm Henry Ediston. I'm an independent chartered financial planner. I work for Efficient Portfolio, and you can find our website at efficientportfolio.co.uk. And what I do is I help my clients plan for a safe, secure financial future and take all the worry and stress away.
And I'm Susie Miller, divorce strategist, stopping wars one family at a time. Thank you.